Are you artificial intelligence? That's the big question we're tackling in this deep dive. You've given us some really interesting stuff to work with, and, well, our mission is pretty straightforward. We want to figure out just what this AI thing is all about, and more specifically, what kind of AI is behind all this information we're looking at.
Yeah, it's a question that's becoming more and more relevant. I mean, AI is kind of popping up everywhere these days. But to really get to the bottom of it, we need to start with the basics. At its heart, artificial intelligence is about creating computer systems that can do the things that normally require human intelligence.
Okay.
Things like learning and problem solving,
Right.
understanding language, even perceiving the world around us and making decisions. Those are kind of the benchmarks we're talking about.
So basically making computers think like us, at least in some ways. Now, in the stuff you gave me, there's a lot of talk about different areas with AI. What are some of the key ones we should be aware of?
Well, there are several subfields that are really important. One is machine learning. That's where computers can actually learn from data without having to be programmed for every single task.
Hmm.
Then there's deep learning, which is like machine learning on steroids. It uses these complex neural networks to analyze just mountains of data and find patterns. And then you've got natural language processing, which is all about enabling computers to understand and generate human language. And of course, there's computer vision, which is all about letting computers see and interpret images.
It really does feel like this whole field has exploded recently. I mean, the stuff you provided mentions that while these ideas have been around for a while, it's really only in the last few decades that we've seen so much progress.
Right?
Which brings us to the specific AI we're discussing today, a large language model, or as they call it, an LLM.
Exactly. LLMs are like the cutting edge of AI right now. They use these deep learning techniques, and they're trained on massive amounts of text and code. I'm talking data sets with billions, even trillions of words.
Wow.
And it's this training that allows them to generate text that sounds so incredibly human-like.
It's really mind-blowing when you think about it. I mean, how do they actually achieve this language ability? Is it really like us?
Well, that's the fascinating part. They do it by analyzing all that data, all those billions of words and lines of code, and identifying the patterns and relationships between them.
So when it writes something, it's not really understanding what it's saying. It's more like predicting the most likely next word based on all those patterns it's learned, right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's all about statistical prediction, not true understanding.
Okay, so it's like a super sophisticated autocomplete, but for, well, everything.
It's a good way to think about it. And the underlying structure of all this is something called a neural network. It's basically inspired by the human brain with all these interconnected nodes that process information.
Like a digital brain, in a way.
And deep learning uses multiple layers in these networks to learn really complex relationships in the data.
But that complexity also makes it hard to understand how it actually arrives at its outputs. The material mentions this black box problem.
Yeah, that's a real challenge in AI research. It can be tough to trace the exact reasoning behind a particular output, even if it's correct.
So with all this in mind, what can this type of AI actually do with text? What's it good at?
Well, the material you provided lists some pretty impressive capabilities: drafting emails and writing articles, even generated computer code. It can also answer questions, translate languages, and summarize information.
It sounds like it could be incredibly useful, like having a superpowered assistant at your fingertips.
It definitely has the potential to streamline a lot of tasks. But it's important to understand that it's not a magic bullet. There are some limitations we need to be aware of.
Right, like the fact that it doesn't actually understand what it's writing about. It's just mimicking human language based on patterns.
Exactly. It doesn't have consciousness or emotions or beliefs or intentions.
So it's important to keep that in mind when using it. And another limitation is that because it learns from data, it can make mistakes.
Absolutely. If its training data contains errors or biases, it can generate incorrect or even misleading information. The material calls these hallucinations.
And of course, its knowledge is limited to what it was trained on. It can't go out and learn new things from real-world experience like we do.
And that also means it might miss some of the nuances of language that come from real-world interactions, like sarcasm or humor.
So even though it's incredibly advanced, it still has a long way to go before it can truly match human capabilities.
I would agree with that.
So just to be crystal clear for our listeners, this deep dive confirms that this AI we're talking about is a large language model, and it's incredibly good at processing and generating text. But it's important to remember that it operates based on patterns and predictions, not consciousness or true understanding.
And as AI, particularly LLMs, become more and more integrated into our lives, it's vital for everyone to understand these fundamental aspects.
Because it's going to impact how we communicate, how we access information, how we solve problems. It might even change how we approach creativity itself.
Absolutely.
So here's a final thought for you to ponder. As AI continues to evolve and maybe even overcome some of these limitations, how will that change our relationship with technology? What new questions will we have to ask ourselves? What ethical considerations will come into play? It's definitely something to think about.
It certainly is.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of AI.